Why does Matt Reustle need to hear this Josh Spector, Dennis Mosley Williams clip? You're about to find out. This is Just Press Record. We talked infotainment, edutainment, all the other variations between Disney and KRS you can imagine. We talked about the degrees of interesting and entertaining into how engaging is the core element to building your audience. And of course, we did all this through the business media building lens that only Matt Reustle can bring to the table. Jack Forehand, let's roll some clips.
Value is transformation. You're taking someone from point A to point B, and your content, your service, your product, whatever is that bridge. If there's no transformation, it's probably not valuable.
I have this idea that you can actually create things for an audience of one, and that one person does not have to be yourself. You should be able to answer two questions right away. It is, what did I learn, and what should I do about it? And if you do, deep research, interesting work, and put it in front of them, it has an incredible hit rate of getting to spend time with these people. The magic and the ultimate case for whether it's great content, great creation, whatever it is taking those two things together, which is not only am I entertained in consuming this, but it's going to allow me to implement something into my own life.
You're watching Just Press Record right here on Cultish Creative YouTube. I'm your host, Matt Zeigler. This is a special Oh Snap, Guess What I Saw episode where I invite a prior guest back just to show them a clip I had to get their perspective on. My guest today, I'm going with, and there's a small age gap here, but small enough I think I can get away with this. Top 3 reasons he would have hated me in high school and not agreed to come on this podcast. So reason number 1, I probably would have called him Nipsey Russell, some variation way too many times because Hollywood Squares, late 90s, you might have missed this part, but like Springer, Maury, all those things, Hollywood Squares.
Oh, yes.
Were you a fan? Did you watch
the reboot? I remember it all. Of course. Yes.
So Nipsey, they'd get to him. He'd do the point at the camera regularly. We just thought he was the funniest guy. And I always loved that he declared himself the poet laureate of television, which if there was ever a title to aspire to, I feel like you would appreciate that too. What a god amongst men. So first reason you would have hated me, I would have referred to you as Nipsey probably all the time. And at least you would have gotten that obscure reference. Now, second one, and there's a little Pennsylvania angle to this one too. I would have gone with Kurt Russell. I would have made you work that, and not overboard Kurt Russell. I wouldn't have made you that, although respect that, and that's the Goldie Hawn Wildcats thing. But I'd be going with the name's Pliskin. And I would have been walking up to you all the time being like, the name's Pliskin. Call me Snake. Which, fan of those movies? Did you go through that phase?
Absolutely. Yes. Kurt Russell as a whole, just somewhat under the radar these days for all that he achieved in his era.
I know, right? All right. I'm glad you feel the same way about Kurt Russell and Call Me Snake. And last but not least, and this is the one that I definitely would have gotten you all the way out of ever committing to a Just Press Record. I would sneak up behind you in the hall. And I'd have to do the, here they come to snuff the Russell. Yeah.
Wow. That's now, yes. Now you're talking. I mean, you built up in a way that, one, I commend you again as a fellow podcast host. You have to do a lot of preparation. You adding this into the workload of these intros and the care and effort that goes into them, I commend you. And the build up in that one, I think, just progressively got better.
We got to build up to my Lane Staley impersonation, which we're recording this early. So coffee doesn't do the same for my Lane Staley impersonation as a few cocktails in the evening. But all jokes behind, the real McCoy or the real Wyatt Earp, or never mind, Business Breakdowns podcast host, Colossus CEO, collector and purchaser of finely aged and aging wares, Matt Reustle. Welcome back to Just Press Record.
It is great to be back again. Thank you for those deep and intertwining intros, which I always appreciate, whether they're for myself or for the others that you have on the show.
Well, I love to hear it. I love that you're both a Nipsey Russell fan and Kurt Russell and Alice in Chains. I mean, we're really, what a holy trinity that is.
It is range. I would say it is range. In fairness, I was once told in middle school, right around that era, it was probably like 98, 99. I did some type of media related thing and somebody said, you would be a really good game show host. So I never pursued that path, but you just put that memory that was deep inside the archive back up front. So I appreciate for that.
one of our favorite local like bar and pizza places that my wife we go to all the time, they always have the game show network on. So if there's not a sporting event on, it's always the game show network. And the locals really enjoy the game show network in this bar. But I've had a lot of thoughts about those game show hosts in the
I
last.
mean, it's reality television at its finest. It was kind of the OG reality television. And for me, that was, again, 90s kid, sick days were typically the game show network. And by 2 p.m., 3 p.m., maybe a little bit later, they would have the reruns on. So I just was
Right.
absolutely excellent at the second go of Jeopardy. And then there were the real deep cuts of the other game shows from back in the day on there as well.
Yeah, nothing like being sick and watching vintage Price is Right episodes, right?
Ritz crackers, chicken noodle
yeah.
soup, and the game show network. Yeah, no better cure.
All right. Well, this is good to know. We share other bizarre social cultural comfort foods. So you're going to guess in a few minutes why I have to show you this clip. But before we dive into what the clip is, who it is, I mean, it's been a couple of months. You and John Candido were on. Anything new or exciting going on in life, career, or otherwise for you?
I mean, it's been very interesting. You know, between that time, you had John back on. Buffett retired. So I enjoy what happens after a great retires. I remember this vividly as an NBA fan with Jordan. And it's who's going to be the next? You know, who should we focus on now? And then it was the deep cuts of Felipe Lopez, Isaiah Ryder. Eventually, we got to Kobe Bryant, Vince Carter, and some of the others. In finance world, I think, you know, there's a different measurement system here, but it was fun to watch people like Chris Hone, you know, kind of get all of the focus and be in the moment a couple of weeks ago. So I've enjoyed watching that. And I am a person who appreciates the seasons, you know, where we just got off of Memorial Day weekend. We've started to see the weather change. Days are longer, bright out earlier, a lot more energy, a lot more growth. And I always try to embrace that springtime into summer and the feel good vibes you get from the people around you.
Now, how's the neighborhood progressing? We got some good. Are the games outside picking up? You got lots of kids playing in the parks?
Oh, certainly. I mean, the kids play in the park, kind of rain or shine, you know, especially with the young ones. So you got to get them outside. But now it's starting to pack up. We have something that I didn't grow up with, but in my area, there's beach clubs. So, you know, it's essentially you buy a parking spot for the summer, but you have access to a private beach club, a locker that's the size of an outdoor shower. You keep your stuff there. So once that kicks off, you know, that kind of congregates a lot of people and water activities. People are putting their boats in. It's fun to watch. Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. I do love a good beach club, and that you have to keep me posted on how that goes. That's an interesting thing. You didn't grow up with the beach club, did you?
No, where I grew up, you know, you bought a badge. Maybe you didn't buy a badge. You just went into the water when the badge checkers came around. So this is a little bit different. I was a little unsure, but I've learned, you know, you just kind of lean into things rather than try to be the outcast. And there are certainly some positives, especially with the parking situations around here. So
Yeah, I can only imagine. And I did find out a few summers ago, the badge checkers, at least on the Jersey Shore, like they got undercover ones now. They come sneaking up on you out of nowhere. You just think it's a random guy. All of a sudden they want to see the badges, which I respect.
it's a real thing. Yeah, it's you know, it's a tough job. Back in my day, it was kind of the job that a lot of kids in sophomore, freshman year of high school took. Now it's gotten a little bit more serious, cracked down. Got to get those tax dollars or whatever they are, you know, to fund the programs. So yeah, it's fair, you know, completely reasonable to me.
Completely fair and reasonable. All right, so I've got this clip. It's Josh Spector. It's Dennis Mosley Williams. One of, I think it's still one of the more popular Just Press Record episodes. If you missed this one, you want to go back and see it. But for now, I got to show you this clip. Later on, you're going to guess why. Jack Forehand, production magic. Roll that clip.
Your job is not to convince anyone of anything. Your job is to offer it to them and make them aware of it. Self-promotion is not, let me sell you, right? Let me convince you to do this thing that you don't want to do. It's, you want to get this result. You want this transformation. It's funny. I talk about transformation all the time. It's one of my keywords. I think, yeah, I always tell people to create value and they go, well, what's value? I go, value is transformation. You're taking someone from point A to point B and your content, your service, your product, whatever is that bridge. If there's no transformation, it's probably not valuable. It's just interesting. It might be interesting, but it's not valuable.
Peter Price.
Right. So I was like, you have this thing that is going to help these specific people make this specific transformation that they want to make. For you to not make them aware of it, for you to not offer it to them is selfish. So if you are a generous person, if you like the idea of doing selfless things, quote unquote self-promotion is you making sure that people who this thing can help are aware it exists. You're not convincing them to buy it, to pay attention, to follow you, to do whatever. You're going, hey, here's this thing, very similar to what you just talked about with your speeches and your topics. I got this thing. I think it could help you. If you want it, awesome. I want you to know it exists. If you don't want it, that's cool too. It's not for you. It's for these other people.
Learn better when they click on it. That's just mechanic.
All right, Matt, you're going to guess why, but I mean, I think I want to start with this point that he makes there. If there's no transformation, it can be interesting, but it can't be valuable. I got to ask you about that one first. What's that make you think of?
Well, when I got into the world of putting this through the lens of media or content, and I think this kind of is an all-encompassing term, anything that you're creating yourself, that you're going to distribute to others, there was a kind of a litmus test that was given to me. This was in my days of writing investment research, and you should be able to answer two questions right away. It is, what did I learn, and what should I do about it? So that to me is similar in framing to what was being said there, which is, if there's not some type of transformation, if there's not some type of idea of what you can do with this, how you can implement this, then what are you really doing? And I would say there's different degrees of this. Like he does mention, it's entertaining. Okay, that's kind of isolated on its own. I think there's a lot of value in entertainment. I think maybe the level of depth that you can create a relationship off the back of it might not be quite there, but I don't think we should completely overlook entertainment. But what I think is kind of the magic and the ultimate case for whether it's great content, great creation, whatever it is taking those two things together, which is not only am I entertained in consuming this, but it's going to allow me to implement something into my own life. And that could be very small. It could be a great quote that you take away that then you use in your dinner conversations, or it can be something about true transformational change, the extreme version of that. And I do agree that is kind of like the perfect mold. So I added some nuance to it, but I think it's a valid point nonetheless.
Okay, so I want to dig a little bit more into the nuance of it because, and you probably don't know this. Do you know Josh Spector at all? Have you ever run into
just
Josh?
a little, just from seeing some of the stuff that he's put out there. Yes.
Okay. So a cool thing I want you to know about Josh and, our closest friends listening to this conversation, something I wanted to tell you about Josh because I didn't think you know it. He did a lot of work and still does with comedians. And so when comedians were trying to build their digital mailing lists originally, he was one of the guys, if you were a comedian, you'd go out and hire to help you put together your mailing list and keep track of your fans to let them know, I'm going to be in Cleveland this weekend or wherever the hell you're going. And so I feel like in this weird way, he understands this connection between what you just said, the spectrum of this is entertainment for entertainment's sake, and this is supposed to serve a purpose.
Yes. And they
Tell
can
me
be
more.
Yes, those can be two distinct things. Again, it's like bridging those two can be the ultimate goal. But you can isolate those two into something specific. It's very interesting to hear about the background with comedians just because that's such a fascinating specter of creation, and it encompasses so many different aspects of how you're creating something, how you're delivering something. And then you take what makes comedians great, which I often think is not the joke itself. It is the body language. It is the voice, the projection, the pauses, the moments, the buildup. And then you put it into an email. So he's helping them with email lists and, bringing people together. That is like a really, really challenging thing to take all of this magic and bottle it up into something that's distributed that way. But I think there's something very valid to that. If you want to get some type of action from the audience itself, that has to be delivered in a way which they're aware that they need to take action, and you make it very easy and simple for them to do that. So I think I'm kind of stuck on that idea of doing this with stand-up comics. It's such a unique corner of the world, but I think that's a completely fair point.
Okay, I need Colossus hat on for a second. When you think about this in modern media and all the study of modern media enterprises, how do you walk this balancing act? Because it's not just, You have to understand this range of degrees that's available to you. Is this pure entertainment, or is this the email that then gets you to go out and see the entertainment? But it's almost like, I feel like every media property wants to understand all those degrees too. Like all those shades of nuance, you're using them all, right?
Absolutely. And it's very interesting. You know, I went back in time to try to figure out this bridging of the two things, the entertainment and the information. And I think it was Disney back in maybe the 50s, you know, talked a lot about infotainment, which was basically the bridging of these two things. I'm going to be informing you, I'm going to be entertaining you. The main question that always comes in is, how deliberate should you be in telling a person how to interpret something? Do you just present it to them and allow them to make the decision on their own? I'm going to give you the facts. I'm going to give you some perspective. But at the end of the day, it's up to you to make the conclusion. I think a lot of people, especially from an audience perspective, appreciate this because they're not being driven in a certain direction. They can kind of encompass all of this. What you will see the most vocal critics on social media say is, you kind of left me hanging. You know, what am I supposed to do with this? What is the main takeaway? What am I, you know, learning and applying from what you just presented to me? It's not applicable, yada, yada, yada. So like that always comes back. And I think what we've seen evolve over time is the capacity to take some large conversation like we're having right now, bottle it up into bite-sized pieces, some of which may be very, very deliberate in terms of directing you to do something, giving you a very specific piece of advice, and then presenting those to your audience in a different format, potentially with added context. So the tweet, which has however many characters you want to add, plus the clip. So you might say, Matt R said this on the pod. I thought this was particularly interesting about that. Now we've just taken something that is information, we've added some context, we've given some direction, and basically taking all the different units of media that you can create, package them in different ways, and allowing people to consume however they want to consume, whether it's the bite-sized clips, whether it is the full long-range confirmation with all that extra nuance and added context, or something in between.
Think about this through, I'll ask you to self-apply this for a second. And not that you're trying to build a complete empire out of this, but like business breakdowns. Mm-hmm. How do you conceptualize this for business breakdowns?
So with business breakdowns, we have a general idea in our head of, we want this to be something that an investment manager can look at a company on their screen. Maybe they get a message from a fellow investment manager. We've really started to study this company, Integris. I think you should check it out. Well, what's the first place they're going to turn to get up to speed? They might have previously gone through a prospectus or an IR presentation, and they're going to get some information. A conversational format via a podcast with an investment manager that owns the name is going to be a very entertaining, informational, and digestible way to get the full context on a situation in a very, very time-efficient way. So that was always, in my mind, kind of like the direct way that we could have an impact, is like, think about that as a substitute. Now, it doesn't stop there. Just because that's my idea of how somebody might use it is actually not how probably the majority of the audience uses it. Like that is the most deliberate way we go about doing it. But you also have, you know, fellow business people building businesses that look very similar to whatever company we just highlighted, who might want to take away insights or observations that were shared on the episode, and they can use that in their own format. So like that is the actual content itself, and you know, how we create it. And then it's about the distribution and the packaging, which, you know, gets later into this conversation, I imagine we'll hit on. But how we go about sharing it is through a variety of the different formats, which I kind of laid out, and kind of highlighting different specific things which we might think are interesting to different specific people.
Okay. Knock it up a notch. And I'll invite you to be critical about anybody you want here. I'm going to say, tell us about how you would apply this to like David Senra, to founders, but apply it anywhere. Apply it to Joe Rogan. Apply it to, give me somebody with big audience or bigger scale and how they approach this. That's not just aimed at the investment community and stuff like that.
Absolutely. I think David is great at this in the sense that he is sharing his own notes. He is sharing takeaways, you know, kind of compiling them all together curating for you, and then connecting the dots to other founders that he's focused on. So it's what are not only the insights that we can take away from this single book on this single founder that we're going to read about this week, but we're going to connect it to the dots and all of the work that I've done on the 400 other books that I've read about these founders, because I have a very specific system about going about tracking this. So whether you have the time to read that specific book, you probably don't have the time to read the other 400 books in the moment, let alone the system for cataloging a lot of the overlying taxonomy, which applies, in terms of focus or, advertising lessons or lessons about leadership. So, he's basically compiling all this, sharing it all in a curated way, but he's not telling you what to do with it. And I think he's pretty deliberate about it. He'll share his view, his opinion, and what he's noticed that the greatest, most successful people in the world focus on. He's not necessarily saying you should do that. He's not necessarily saying there's not people who go a different direction. So he's kind of just delivering it to you. And what I love about it is when he compiles ways to share this, beyond the full episode, he's taking those compilations and then distributing them in a very thoughtful way. So now he's emerged into, video and doing more things along that line. So you know what you're going to get, and he's packaging it in a very thoughtful way. So hopefully that's addressing the road you were going down. But let me know if it's a different direction.
No, and I think this is what I was interested in, because even when I take in something like Senra, and when I take in something like, now this Dyson autobiography is going to live in my bajillion-dollar Amazon wishlist box forever, because damn you, of course you had to, it's the only thing worse is listening to a Questlove playlist and be like, well, you can't stream any of these albums, so good luck with YouTube, or go record shopping for 40 years and you might be able
want
to put
what you can't have. Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
this 8-minute set. So there's the great shortcut into that. But it's this whole not telling you, and I think this is one of my fascinations with the whole Founder series, not telling you what to do. I'm just giving you like this, these are the highlighted pieces, these are how they connect, and oh yeah, here's a Ferrari note mixed in here somewhere too. But it's not prescriptive. It's not that here's 3 life hacks to get you out of bed in the morning, and it's crack for so many people. We're addicted to this stuff. What is that?
100%. I think as much as it's not telling you what to do, it is a very clear, effort to compile a ton of work. I am providing you with objective, analysis in terms of everything that I've done. And there's a difference between, okay, I've done this myself. You don't know who I am. I'm going to tell you these 3 life hacks. That is different than, I've read 400 books on founders. This is a theme that continuously comes up, and I've noticed it, and perhaps you haven't, because you haven't, gone into 400 books. You're not a maniac on a mission like I am. But, do with this as you may. And to me, it's not prescriptive, but there's a pretty deliberate idea of, what you should take away. And I think it's like the biggest selling point on approaching things that way is you are not underestimating your audience. It's kind of treating your audience with the ultimate level of respect, which is, I trust that you appreciate what I'm saying here. I trust that you are intelligent enough to take it down your own path. I can't give you the specific advice because your life is going to have different context than what these people were going through, but just be aware of this. And that kind of like segues into another theme, which I appreciate for many podcasts, is you have to decide when you dumb things down versus when you just continue to have a conversation that maybe only a select handful of people will understand. If you're talking about macro funds or ETFs, you're going to be throwing out these acronyms, which are, unknowable to people outside of that world for obvious reasons. And do you stop to define every word and term and make it more inviting? Or do you stick with the path that you're on, trust that the people that are meant to listen to it will? And if somebody is interested in it, they will, you kind of trust that they'll teach themselves enough to be able to comprehend whatever you're mentioning and to be able to understand the language over time. So that's another thing. And, whether you call it respect or treating your audience with a certain level of admiration for their ability to pick up these things. Those are things, a different way of phrasing it or framing it, I think.
So he's only partially in this clip, but it's really important that the bookends are like outside of this clip if somebody goes back and watches it, which is Dennis Mosley Williams. And have you had any interaction with Dennis? I know he's finance
None.
adjacent at least.
Yes, I recognize the name, but no interaction. Yeah.
Dennis did. Do you remember that book, The Experience Economy? Does this ring a bell to you?
It does.
That's
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Dennis did a lot of work with those guys and is very, very focused on experience. And so this is kind of where I wanted this to land with you specifically because of what you just said, which is, and Dennis at the very tail end of that clip, he makes a comment of separating with what Josh is saying, of saying that's just the mechanics. Like that part at the end, the distribution, like that's just the mechanics. But the rest of it, what you were just talking about is the experiential part of it. And experience is different from transformation somehow, but they seem really closely linked. How do you see it?
Yes. Well, I think sometimes experience is what drives transformation. So, going through something is how you gain experience, or being out there is what gains experience. Reading is not necessarily experience in and of itself. Taking action with whatever you read is where you gain the experience of doing something. You can kind of take it all in and eventually you have to put stuff out. So operating, creating, building, whatever it might be. And the best lessons come through experience. The transformation comes through the experience. So I think when you have unique experiences, when you've, I as time has gone on, I've come to appreciate, okay, don't overlook what we've all have as great assets. And those great assets are oftentimes, what have you been doing for the past 4 years, the past 10 years, that other people haven't? Those are things that you will know about that they might not know about. And oftentimes they're very interesting things. And that is probably the best well to go to if you want to create anything. So I think it's what differentiates you, and that can lead to transformation for others because you're basically taking from, again, hands-on, out there in the real world experience. You've experienced some type of transformation. You can share that with somebody else who might be interested in going down that path as well.
It's great because it's part of what Josh is saying there too, where something that doesn't offer transformation can still be interesting. We could have a whole conversation about Hollywood Squares and Nipsey Russell.
Right.
The poet laureate of television, and most people are not going to care. But those little, they're those it's almost an anti-monoculture screed to say, what's the weird stuff that drives your experience? And then how does that get converted into little pieces of transformation for where it matters?
And what it really triggers for me too is going back to the earlier point, going back to some of the conversations you had about breadcrumbs, and a little idea like that, depending on the experience that somebody has had. When you bring up game shows, I think about the 90s, those game shows, and they're still very popular today. But then I go back to, and the name is escaping me, that viral game show, which was on the phones that blew up and then that kind of had a tragic downfall.
Oh, yeah. The one that everybody played on their phones, that trivia game for that period of time.
Yeah,
that was
HQ
called.
Trivia maybe?
Sounds right.
And to me, it's like that is a format which hasn't quite been revisited. I'm sure there's great reasons why another one hasn't caught on. But my gosh, was that a massive viral hit that overtook the world for a month, whatever time period it was, seemed very interesting. And just kind of like seeding that, it's been on my brain ever since you brought up, Hollywood Squares. Those are other things. You don't necessarily know, everything you mentioned, the experience that you're referencing, how that's going to trigger an idea in somebody's head. They might not remember that was exactly what triggered the idea, but now that we've kind of encompassed this, if I ever come out with a viral, streaming digital game show, I can certainly attribute it back to you. You'll get your royalties.
I'll get my royalties, and because AI Kurt Russell will be the host.
That's right.
Of the game show. We'll know where it came from. All right, you're gonna guess in a second why I had to show you this clip. First off, though, people want to find you on the internet. They want to bug you online. Where should they look you up these days?
Twitter is probably the best. At Russell Matt is where I'm at. I still jump in on X. Sorry, I will always refer to it as Twitter. That's
it's
kind of
always
like
Twitter.
My
it is forever.
Yes. MattRussell.com is some writing ends up there. JoinColossus.com is where you find all the business breakdowns and the transcripts. So you get a wide range. I'm leaning into the wide range. Everybody's in on focus these days and kind of having a narrow lane. I'm a believer that we just saw Buffett being a very wide range guy that compounded slowly over time. We can't underestimate the value of that slow compounding. Why, narrow focus is, to me, is the extreme outcomes. You're increasing the likelihood for a high reward. You're also increasing the likelihood for high risk. Whereas, wide range, you can dive deep into rabbit holes. That's something that's more likely to result in slow compounding, and there is nothing wrong with that.
There is nothing wrong with that. Luxurious, wide lanes. I also have to point out too, because now I really want to know, I remember the Disney infotainment, and I also remember the one that was in my brain was KRS-One did edutainment. I was like, which one came first? Who incepted the other?
Man, well, I know what I'm doing after we stop recording.
Right.
So once you just press stop recording, that's what I'll check out. But yeah, I went deep down the rabbit hole back in the day. There's that crazy flywheel picture of Disney,
Yeah.
which I just have to get off my chest. Does not feel like much of a flywheel. There's a lot of different things going on. It's a very cool graphic. It's a very cool picture. But, I think
I'm glad you got that far into it, not stuck on the why isn't it a mouse wheel? Why isn't it a hamster wheel? Like,
that's fair
where's
point. Yeah. Crazy mind. But yeah, I'm not sure who it was first.
It's very, very interesting. Also, if you ever say anything bad, disparaging, or fairly uninformed about the character Mortimer Mouse, who was like evil Mickey on the Disney Channel that I didn't get when I was a kid, but I brought him up in another podcast, and the comments let me know all the ways I was wrong, and it was amazing. So Mortimer Mouse
Disney
thoughts.
triggers the algo, I guess. That's
Lots of triggers. Yeah, something about that. So let's play the guessing game. Why do you think I needed to show you this clip with Josh Spector and Dennis Mosley Williams?
So the conversation that we just had is a little different than the reason that I thought you showed it to me. The reason I thought you showed it to me was because I believe we had a conversation about this in terms of putting our work out there, promoting it, how to do that in a comfortable way. And there's different extremes of people. There are some people who have no fear, no issue, just blasting anything they do out there, being self-congratulatory in the most negative way. And then there is a large swath of people who do really great content, who are a little bit more humble, and this can be detrimental. Like, it can go to a detrimental extreme. This may happen to me from time to time. It may happen to you from time to time. But there's this uncomfortability with sharing your own work or promoting it. And I often think, like, an easy way to measure it is, if you do a lot of work, if you create a lot of work, how much of that are you sharing with people versus third party? And I think about this sometimes. It's like, I'm always sending interesting podcasts to other people or interesting things I read, and I'm distributing it. And I very rarely will send them things that I do. When I step back and think about that, it's like, is that right? Like, am I just doing a disservice to myself? And I think there's degrees of differences. You don't want to necessarily just be classified as a self-promoter that can come with negative connotation, but equally, you definitely don't want to be a self-silencer and someone who just expects people to show up and romanticizes at the idea of people will just find me. I'll put it out there and people will find me. So it resonated a lot with me. I think that the description of how this can impact people and transform people really kind of layers in with some of my thoughts, which is, if you know something or think something will be valuable to someone, make sure they get it and do it with a personalized note. Like, my favorite way is, don't just do it on social media, send a personalized note. We just had this conversation about, management meetings and how to handle them. I put this together. Let me know if you have thoughts or any feedback. And guess what? It works incredibly well, especially when there's something, timely and interesting for the person on the other side of things. That can open up doors. That can create a lot of different things. I have this idea that you can actually create things for an audience of one, and that one person does not have to be yourself. It can be someone very specific in mind that cares about a topic. And if you do, deep research, interesting work, and put it in front of them, it has an incredible hit rate of getting to spend time with these people. So it all resonated a lot with me. That was my thought process for why you wanted to show it to me. But tell me if I'm way off based on, the first portion of this conversation, which didn't really dive into too much of that.
No, but it's perfect that you landed it there, because I wanted to a bunch of those in this conversation, or I hoped it would go there, because I'm also guessing when I'm filling this in on the back of this, like I have no idea what the hell is about to happen in the conversation, which is part of the fun. I think being wrong in public is one of the services that I can offer.
It's this is not, I wouldn't say it's being wrong necessarily. I do love whoever said it. I really have to figure it out because I've said it like 5 times recently, but the best way to get a right answer is to give the wrong answer on the internet. And it's just so perfect. But you never find out, the answer unless you present your own answer. So I was off, but I think it was still, close enough.
You're on the essence of it. So the thing I wrote down was I wrote value, things that transform, and across time, space, and life, which is something that I know you do deeply when you think about this. And I think the experience part, which is what I feel like I'm missing from this statement, because it's value things that transform, but like values the experiences that enable the transformation. This is the hard part about these stories on the spot. Do you know the story? You know who Kenny Beats is? You're familiar with this, the producer, Kenny Beats? Okay.
I don't think so.
There's a great story about Kenny Beats and basically how he ends up working with Rick Rubin. And the way that he ends up working with Rick Rubin on this specific project is he literally makes like a 1-of-1 tape for Rick Rubin. And he's like, I want to get myself in front of this guy. And the way I'm going to do it was with a tape. And I'm literally going to mail this guy like a small boombox or a cassette deck with the tape in it and just like a note that says press play or something stupid. And he was like, the way I'll get my music in front of him, I just have to figure out where he will be the person to open this and be like, how can I not press this button and find out what's on this? And then it just has to be killer.
It's absolutely amazing. I need to steal that example because I actually have experiences myself of doing something very similar where I wanted certain guests on podcasts. I recorded with other guests that I knew they thought highly of, that were not maybe, as saturated or widely spread, and did something that I found interesting, but I knew they would find interesting. I didn't even send it to that person, but it led to them posting about it. Then it led to a conversation, and it was just an incredible outcome that really opened up my eyes. And then I started to lean into that a little bit more. And now I have an example, from outside that world, which I think speaks to it. And I think it's, it's this idea of picturing your audience sometimes really needs to be taken down to the narrowest lens. And again, if you can think about a single human being that you would love to, consume this and find value in it, it's not just created just for them. You might mail that cassette. The beautiful thing about the digital world and the internet now is you might create it for one person, but everybody gets to enjoy it. And it is a magical, magical thing that if I were to give advice to people in terms of how they create things, that would be something to keep in mind.
Absolutely. Matt, I want to thank you so much for coming back on. I'm going to have you again. This is the great part about this format.
Always enjoy it. I enjoy participating and I enjoy consuming.
All right, Matt, we'll talk to you soon.
Great.
Thanks for joining us. Like, comment, and hey, subscribe below to Cultish Creative on YouTube if you haven't already. As the good compliance people want me to remind you, Matt Zeigler, that's me, is a managing director at Sunpoint Investments. The opinions expressed in this podcast do not necessarily reflect the opinions of Sunpoint Investments. No information on this podcast should be construed as investment advice. Securities discussed in the podcast may be holdings of clients of Sunpoint Investments. I hope you've been entertained. I hope you found this useful. I hope you talk to a professional before you try any of this stuff at home. And most of all, I hope you've subscribed. Be nice to each other out there. And don't forget, head over to cultishcreative.com and let's make curiosity a habit together. And I'm out.